Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome to Tag Tuesday. My good friend Alana over at Big Hard Books and Classics was kind enough to tags me a lot, and I'm finally actually going to do one of the tags, and this tag is the evolution of the reader tag. The tag was created by the channel Spread Book Joy, and Alan tagged me, and I've seen this going around a lot, and I think it's really interesting. It's one of those kind of tags which, is kind of fun to do because you don't have to pull a lot of books off your shelf and you can just kind of sit down and ad-lib it. And so that's what I'm doing. So here are the prompts. Prompt number one, what you read. How has your taste in books evolved? Well, I'm trying to stop saying that I'm old because when I do, people get my comments and tell me I'm not old. So what I will say is, when you've been alive for 55 years, your reading tastes have evolved a lot over time. As a kid, I read little kid history books a lot. When I was a kid, somewhere around the age of 12, I told the story. My mom gave me a box set of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings paperbacks, which I still have. And I read those pretty obsessively over and over again. That kind of made me into a reader of fantasy. I read the David Eddings Belgariad series, the first one of those. I read, Terry Brooks' The Sword of Shannara and The Elfstones of Shannara. I read those two, but none of the rest of them. And I learned that there are lots of those. I read the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant by Stephen R. Donaldson. I read both the first and the second Chronicles of Thomas Covenant. And I also read his kind of a really series of big books. The main character was a woman, and I've forgotten the names of those books, but I have hardbacks of them somewhere, which I got a long time ago. I read the Riverworld series. I mentioned this in my last video. I was talking about reading the nonfiction book River of the Gods. Let's see, what else? I think that I read a lot of fantasy books, and then I went to college. And when I got to college, I met someone who became my best friend, and he really was a reader of American 20th century classics. So he really got me into reading Hemingway and Faulkner and Fitzgerald. And from there, that became the focus of my reading, and that really was the focus of my reading for quite some time. Reading almost strictly Americans and mostly men. I read, the group of authors, with the exception of Philip Roth. I read a lot of Updike. I read a lot of Saul Bellow. I started reading Don DeLillo around that time, and then, I expanded my reading a little bit by reading prize winners, Nobel Prize winners, National Book Award winners, Pulitzer winners. I had no idea what the Booker Prize was for a while, and I started reading those, and so that kind of diversified my reading a little bit and kind of got me to where I was. And today, at the same time, I was reading a lot of detective fiction. P.D. James, one of my favorites. I'm planning on doing a video about her work here maybe next week. Let's see. Anyway, I read a lot of detective fiction. I like that. A little bit of spy fiction. I like that. And I still kind of read that way. But for the most part, I think I kind of became a book snob who really focused on reading serious literature for a while. And hopefully I'm breaking away from that as part of my evolution. Because, one of the things I think that is true about me is that my reading tastes do continue to evolve. Prompt 2, how you read. How has the format of your reading changed? Or has the format of your reading changed much? And the answer is yes, in part because, at the age of 55, when I started reading, the only real options were physical books. I have begun listening to audiobooks more often, particularly classics, which I listen to through LibriVox. And then I do have a Kindle, and I have been reading ebooks, and I like that. I think if you were to ask me, I still prefer the physical book, but ebooks are incredibly convenient, and since they like themselves, you can read them under almost any circumstance. But I do read different formats than I used to. Question 3 or prompt 3: how much you read? Do you read more? Do you read more or less than previous? When do you read? And has how often you read changed? I read more than I did before Booktube. This is a question kind of giving away a prompt that's coming up. I read more than I did before Booktube, but I've always been somebody who had a book going. It's just that I go through books a lot faster. Before Booktube, I was probably reading 30 to 40 books a year. With Booktube, I'm probably reading closer to 60 or 70 books a year. One of the things about this question, I thought about this question, I've said this many times on my channel, as a slow reader, I can have a book going for a long period of time, and feel like I'm always reading. When do I read? I read. Well, I'm retired now, so I read whenever I want to. I was watching a video that Olly from Olly did about how Booktube is a great place for discussion and information and interacting about books, and I really liked that video. But he mentioned that if he's not doing something else, he almost always has a book in his hand. He's always reading, and that's not me. So if you think you have to be that kind of person to be on Booktube, I'll say that I'm not like that. I do other things. Sometimes I do nothing instead of reading, but I do always have a book, and I usually read it whenever the mood strikes me. I think most often you find me reading in the mid-morning to the early afternoon now, and then a little bit at night. That's probably when I'm most likely to read. And how often I read changed? Yes, it has, and that kind of brings me to question 4. How has Booktube changed you as a reader? I read more consistently, I read more often. I read more than one book at a time. That's kind of a Booktube thing that I think happens to lots of people when they get on Booktube and they get involved with a lot of Booktube events and buddy reads and stuff like that. You begin to read more than one book at a time. And then Booktube has really diversified what I read. The incredible diversity of books that are read by people and booktubers on Booktube has really opened my eyes to a lot of literature and writing and genre fiction that I never would have looked at before, and I think Booktube is largely responsible for breaking me out of my book snobbery and making me realize that there are great books being written by that have been written by people all over the world under all kinds of circumstances and all kinds of people, and I want to read more of those books. So my book reading has become a lot more diverse, intentionally so, because I just want to experience a lot of what those books have to offer, and that's just been really probably my favorite thing about Booktube. And then prompt 5 is just to tag some people. I'm going to tag a few people. I don't know if these people have done the tag or not, but I'm tagging them anyway. I'm going to tag Scott from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, Joe Renee from Joe Renee Reads, Jen from Remembered Reads, because all these people I'm tagging, I think it'd be really interesting to learn about their evolution as readers. I'm going to tag Stella from It's Too Late to Apologize, a channel that I'm relatively new to. And then Alana Estelle, who does just great book reviews. I want to tag her to do this as well. Anyway, there you go. There is my Evolution of the Reader tag. Thanks again to Alan and to Spread Book Joy for creating this great tag. I had a great time doing it. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.